Welcome to another exciting interview. We're going to go solo cast today. We're doing a warriorship conversing with a man of the mats, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner and competitor, as well as teacher, as well as athletic trainer, and a pretty cool all-around guy, someone that I've been talking to for almost 2 years now, maybe a little longer, and am very impressed with his podcast and everything else that he's doing with his life. Welcome to the show, Will Safford. Will, thanks for joining me today.
Randel, thank you so much, man. It's an honor to be on your show, and I think what you're doing for the community is absolutely amazing. You know, I think we're lucky to have a guy like you who's connecting us all. I think, you know, that's one of the things that you do really well is you connect the whole community and you really reach out beyond lines. You know, a lot of martial arts just kind of stay in their corner. You know, I'm a jiu-jitsu guy. The jiu-jitsu world is thriving, and you know, a lot of us just stay in that world. And I think something that you do that's great is you try to connect us all. And I love getting messages from you, man. I love listening to your podcast. So really appreciate what you're doing there.
Thank you. I appreciate you too, sir. I'm also a fan of your podcast, Seek Order in Progress. But we'll talk about that in a minute. What's that, my friend?
It's Order in Progress, but the Instagram handle is seek.progress, and then the website is Seek Progress. Order in Progress wasn't available, so I kind of had to, get creative there, but it works.
Well, we'll get to your podcasting journey in just a second. Would you tell the audience how you found Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
Yeah, so I was 25. I'm 39 now. I just got out of college like 2-3 years before that, and I was competitive in sports my whole life, competitive in college, and I had moved to San Diego after college from New York, and I was super young and wanted to continue to do something competitive and athletic. So I was looking for something to do. I was doing all these different intramural leagues and volleyball, basketball, and man, at this time, believe it or not, it's kind of cliche, but Joe Rogan was a big influence in my life. This was 2008, 2009. Joe had a blog way before the podcast that was super interesting. His blog was incredible, and he had this message board, and that was a wild place, but he was always talking about the benefits of martial arts, you know, and the benefits particularly of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And so I decided when I was 25 to try a bunch of different martial arts, you know, figure out which one I wanted to pursue. I did Muay Thai, I did Taekwondo, I did Judo, Kempo. I did a bunch of different things. And then I actually had my first class with Saulo Ribeiro, who was a legendary black belt in San Diego, and absolutely fell in love with it. First class, I was like, this is the one. This is the one that I want to pursue. And that was it. Believe it or not, I didn't sign up with Saulo. I chose a different school, but I actually started jiu-jitsu in July of 2010 and have been training ever since.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So you said you'd played a bunch of different sports. You were very athletic. What was the key to getting you into the competition side of jiu-jitsu?
I think it was the challenge. You know, I originally didn't even want to compete, but I had some natural advantages. I mean, I'm a big guy. I'm 6'3". I'm 215 at that time. Yeah, I was 215. Athletic. You know, I don't carry a lot of extra weight on me, and I was advancing really fast as a white belt. And so I was like, man, I gotta challenge myself here. And competing was not really anything that I wanted to pursue. I was a businessman at this time. I was working in finance and trying to build a career, believe it or not, in financial services. And so I was just, on the weekends driving up to Orange County in LA and kind of doing these small little local events. And I just really enjoyed it. I love the challenge, the mental aspect of preparing for a competition, the day of, I actually don't compete really at all anymore. I won a big tournament. It was the SJJIF World Championship, and that was like the pinnacle for me. As someone who's not a full-time competitor, right? As someone who's more of a hobbyist, that was like, all right, I'm gonna end it on a high note here. And so, but then in 2017, I got a job with Flow Grappling, and I was traveling the world doing media for all of the highest level jiu-jitsu competitions, IBJJF Worlds, ADCC, AJP Tour. They were sending me to Japan, Brazil, all over. So I really immersed myself in the elite high level competition world, but I was doing it more on the media side. But that was a fantastic experience and kind of led me into podcasting, believe it or not. So, yeah, that's kind of how it all came together.
When you were doing the work, doing the international media side of things, did you get to talk to high level competitors, and did you glean any knowledge off of them? Was there anything special or anybody that really stands out to you that's like, man, I'll never forget that piece of knowledge, or I'll never forget that piece of information? Or did you mainly have to focus on doing the job itself?
Oh yeah, man. I was immersed, I was training with a lot of the guys too. That was part of the job. We got to roll with, the Gordon Ryans and the Boucheshes and, Andre, like I'm a brown belt under Galvao, but, yeah, we got to be on the mats with the absolute best grapplers on the planet. And, there are so many things. I think what's really interesting was the mental aspect. I mean, that is what it comes down to at that level. And it's not even just the mental being able to compete when the pressure's on, but it is the grind of the jiu-jitsu competitor lifestyle. I mean, it's the intensity that they are sustaining day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year that will make anyone who does not have, the mental capacity for that to break. It will absolutely break you. So I developed a real respect for just the commitment to the grind and doing all of the really boring, basic, repetitive stuff every single day, year after year, right? And really treating yourself like a professional. For some of these events don't even pay any money. So you're living your life like an absolute professional. You're not partying. You're giving up, careers. You're giving up family time, friend time. You're sacrificing your body, for just the love of it, which is really pretty amazing. So, yeah, incredible experience. But that's the number one thing that I left with was the respect that I have for those athletes who just do it every single day.
It's fascinating too, because you were talking about the mental side of it and having to have that kind of emotional, mental, and even physical fortitude that you're trying to build and train. And it's funny too, because the BJJ podcast that I listen to, I consider yours to kind of be something of a multi-faceted podcast, not just BJJ, but a few of them that I listen to that I really like. The first one I ever really started listening to was Josh McKinney's podcast, the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu podcast. I really enjoy that. Josh talks like a coach. And that's how Owen and I try to talk on Kung Fu Conversations like a coach. How do we train? What problems arise? How did we get over these problems or our training, not only for us, but for our students? And so that's kind of the model. I really liked what Josh is doing over there at I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu. But the two that the new one that I found the other day was BJJ Mental Models. I enjoyed that one quite a bit.
Excellent.
And then BJJ Meditations with Joe from Jersey. I really like Joe. And so those two right there talk about the mental side of it. Are you saying that maybe the mental side of training is something that people don't pay attention to enough? Not maybe in just Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but even in whether you're working out or whatever, physical activity that you do. Would you say something like that, Will?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think it all comes back to the mind, right? Everything comes back to the mind. And so like you asked earlier why I got into jiu-jitsu, and I see jiu-jitsu as a vehicle for human development. That's what martial arts are, right? And they all pretty much do the same thing. But they develop you as a human being. And that number one thing that develops is your mind, right? Like your body, absolutely. Your body might actually not develop, but break down, right? But your mind, from years and years and years on the mat of handling challenges regularly. So now I market jiu-jitsu, right? I have a marketing company, in addition to all those other things that you mentioned in the beginning. And that's one of the number one things that I try to get across to people is that martial arts is going to transform your life, whether you like it or not, right? It's like, it's you look at, oh, cool, I can learn how to do a submission. I can learn how to beat somebody up. But really, I don't think there's anything in the world that's literally going to transform your life like martial arts. And it's your mind that transforms. It's overcoming challenges regularly, getting more comfortable with being uncomfortable, dealing with adversity, dealing with injuries, dealing with pain constantly, man. That's what jiu-jitsu is. Especially if you start it later in life, you're going to be dealing with a lot of pain, getting around that, right? Thinking under pressure, applying techniques when you're in a bad spot, right? And all of these things transform you as a person, your mind, to be just better able to handle everything off the mat. Right? You're just more relaxed as a person. Everything's a little bit easier to handle, once you've been fighting for your life in the 9 a.m. class at Atos, you know? So yeah, I think that kind of answers your question, but yeah, it absolutely transforms your mind.
Yeah. I think I was listening. I can't remember if it was, which podcast it was. It was a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu podcast, but it's like, even the gentleman was talking, he's like, even when I'm competing, you know, there might be 2 hours in the morning that I train and then 2 hours that I roll every day. But he's like, but that's maybe 4 to 6 hours a day on the mat. He's like, what about the other hours? What about the other hours when I'm a husband or, you know, a boyfriend or, you know, I'm at work or I'm a father or all those other things? You have those other hats and those roles that you have to fill in your life. Mm-hmm. And hopefully that mat time will help make that other time in your life better and richer and more focused. You know, the intangibles that we learn as martial artists are vitally important.
Absolutely. They absolutely are. I think the biggest thing for me when I realized how much I really needed jiu-jitsu was the pandemic. When everything was shut down and I had been training for, at that point, 10 years, you know, just 10 years of on the mat, and then you can't be on the mat anymore. I was like, whoa, right. You kind of get a little bit in a funk, you know, you get a little depressed. You don't have this outlet. It's such a healthy outlet, especially for young men, who are in those developmental 20 years old, where you're really trying to find your place in the world and stuff. And you still kind of got a little bit of that young macho thing going on. Like, it really does. It just helps balance you out a lot. So just like you're saying, with all those other things that you have to do as a man, yeah, it absolutely balances you out for those things.
Tell me about the podcast. You were telling us where the origin point was. What is the podcast? Tell us about it. Tell us the name again, please, and where we can find it. And, you know, I personally know that the podcast has changed from the very first year to the following years. And tell us that progression too, please, Will.
Yeah, so it's called the Order in Progress podcast, which you can find at seekprogress.com. It's on, you know, Apple and Spotify and all that stuff. But that podcast came out of the pandemic as well. I had noticed, so at that time I was 35, just turned 35. And I have been a strength and conditioning coach since 2012. So at that time it was 8 years. And I thought I had it all figured out. I was Order in Progress before it was a podcast was a strength and conditioning apparel company where I was posting blog articles, and actually in 2014 I was the head strength and conditioning contributor writer for Jiu-Jitsu magazine, which evolved into a role as the assistant editor of Jiu-Jitsu magazine. So I was really, really heavy into strength and conditioning content for Jiu-Jitsu. In my earlier years as a coach, I was a personal trainer and a fitness coach, and so I thought I had it all figured out. Right? I was like, oh, I'm doing my 6 human movements: squat, push, pull, lunge, hinge, carry. Yep. Right? And I'm doing my Kelly Starrett joint mobility. So I got, I'm all figured out. I'm not going to have any pain. I'm just going to keep on ascending to just optimization until my days are done. Right.
Right.
I hit 35 and I was broken. I mean, that's just the best way to put it. Like nothing was freaking working anymore. It was like I was getting hurt every time I was stepping on the mat. And I was really kind of confused. I was like, well, I'm only 35. I still want to stay doing jiu-jitsu for much longer, but I'm getting hurt all the time. I'm in pain. Like, what is going on here? So I really had to take a look inward and say, hey, maybe what you think you know about training the body and how the body operates is not correct. And that's hard, I think, for a lot of people. But
100%.
Especially a coach who's, almost 10 years in and, you've kind of built this name as the head strength and conditioning contributor, writer for this magazine. At that time was the big magazine. It's no longer around because they didn't keep up with the times. But so I went back into the lab, and the reason why I named the company Order in Progress, aside from being the motto on the Brazilian flag, it's really a motto that you can kind of live by. So order means I translate it to discipline, right? And that's just martial arts in itself, right? So order is structure, discipline, some kind of system, routine that you follow. And progress is this kind of commitment to continually self-improve, where, the old saying, there is no finish line. So you're never actually getting to the end point. It's this commitment to just constantly work toward something that's better than where you're currently at. And so I said, man, I gotta reevaluate everything. I need to Order in Progress. I need to go back into the lab and dive deep into, new methods that I just, haven't looked at before. And so that's what started the podcast, was me selfishly interviewing all these best coaches around the world for my own, knowledge. And of course I'm doing my own research and education so I can, figure this issue or this thing that is the human body, kind of figure that all out. And so the jiu-jitsu or the podcast, then I did, I think 10 episodes in season 1. And it continued to evolve. And I said, okay, I'm kind of funneling toward a new way of thinking about how to manage, train, recover, just overall manage your body. And it's not only for jiu-jitsu, but it's for life, right? Because I always say this, if you are training to be a good jiu-jitsu athlete, or if you're training to be a good martial artist, essentially what you are training to do is to be an exceptional human being. You're training to be a ninja, right? A ninja needs to have everything, right? You're a cat, you're a crow, you're a crane, right? All the tradition.
Yeah.
So you have to have all these different qualities. And so whatever a jiu-jitsu guy is doing, a martial artist is doing, that's absolutely going to help a regular human being. right? So I was kind of unraveling all of this really interesting stuff about how to manage the human body. And it transcends jiu-jitsu, right? This stuff can be applied to absolutely anybody. And so the season 2 transformed more into a specific type of coach, where season 1 was like, I was interviewing everybody, right? I was interviewing athletes, jiu-jitsu coaches, judokas, grapple, anybody, and then also strength and conditioning coaches. Season 2 transformed more into biomechanics. And that's really where it all led me to, was really understanding biomechanics and how the body is supposed to function biomechanically. And there's a lot of coaches out there. There's a lot of really high level athletes, professional athletes, who don't really care too much about biomechanics. They're completely fine with doing what I was doing, which was those traditional squat, push, pull, right? The biomechanics side of things looks at more so how the body was designed to move and prioritizes that first, which is essentially rotational movement, walking, running, and throwing. That's biomechanically what the body is designed to do. And so I transformed season 2 into interviewing more coaches like that. Season 3, I said, you know what? I got a lot of opinions now. I got a lot of knowledge that I've accumulated over the last 4 years and all of my time before that, right? The 10 years that I was a strength and conditioning coach. I said, I need to do solo casts where it's just me delivering my information that I've, right? So season 3 and where we're at now, admittedly, I haven't really recorded too many podcasts, but there is a plan to do many more, is really delivering shorter podcasts, not interview style, just talking to the mic about what I've discovered and what I've learned, because I think it really can help a lot of people, if not everybody. But certainly somebody who has gotten to this point in their jiu-jitsu career, or maybe their athletic career, or just in age, and they're saying, man, I'm breaking down. What is happening? And the mind, getting back to the mind wants to keep going, right? The mind is like,
absolutely.
I want to roll hard, man. I want to train every day. I want to train twice a day. But the body's like, you gotta find a different way. And so everything that I've really learned over the last couple of years is how to better manage your body so that you can continue to do what you love, particularly martial arts and jiu-jitsu.
Would you tell us a little bit about some of the people that stood out for you in season 2? I know you went to a bunch of different seminars all over the world, did some certifications. Tell us a little bit about what it was like going from your traditional, because I had the same process about 12 to 15 years ago. It was the same thing. I'd done a linear martial art. I love Wing Chun. I still teach it, but Wing Chun is very linear, and it's point A to point B. And then I was trained in Olympic powerlifting, snatch, squat, deadlift. And then I would add on, your bench press and pull downs. So I had linear weight training, a linear martial art. And at 30 or 31, I started to notice I'm not broken, but I'm achy. Why am I achy?
Yeah.
And found my Xingyi instructor. Xingyi is a dynamic movement martial arts. And then found the light Indian clubs, and then discovered some of the old training that I had, and then found the mace, found the Indian clubs, and found the kettlebell, and kind of went from there. And so, a similar journey, a similar process. But could you tell me what it was like going from, because I tell you, it was, for me, going from that deadlift culture to something like kettlebell, this is very foreign.
Yeah.
I don't know how you handled that. Tell us about how you dealt with that and who you worked with that really stood out and shined. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really interesting how you will find, the teacher will reveal itself when the time is right. I wish I had found these things in my 20s, because I really do think I could have delayed the process, that achy process. And the thing is, if you start training with more of a biomechanic lens, your performance also improves. So and I'll also say this, you don't have to give up the linear training, right? But this was one of the biggest things that I noticed, was that there is this very nasty split in the strength and conditioning, human performance world between the biomechanics, quote unquote, movement guys and the, traditional strength and conditioning coaches, where strength and conditioning coaches are, they prioritize strength mainly, right? It's strength through heavy resistance training with barbells, mainly barbells, right? It's the squats, just like you're saying, the bench, the deadlift, that's the priority. And then there's the other side of the world where it's like the flow guys, where like you just need to flow and release your fascia. And I kind of fall right in between, where first thing I'll say to anyone is that do whatever you want to do. Like this life is too short to be doing something that you don't want to do. If you want to squat and deadlift and bench and that brings you joy, do that, right? But if you are open-minded and you want to explore things that could potentially help your longevity and help your movement and how you feel in your body, you do need to be open-minded, and need to be open-minded to things that are not peer-reviewed scientific studies, right? A lot of this stuff is some of it, Randel, has been passed on for thousands of years. Right? Like the fascia, they've been training the fascia for thousands of years, but now it's just making it's making a, resurgence, I guess. There was no scientific studies back then, but all the twisting that they were doing in some of these like internal martial arts, right? And like the joint mobility stuff that they were doing in these different martial arts, that was all you're wringing out fascia, right? You're stretching fascia, and, some coaches are not paying attention to that stuff whatsoever. So, there was this trip that I went on in 2021 to Hawaii. I got invited to go to this fitness coaches, like retreat, let's call it. And it was all coaches who were on more of this biomechanical side of the equation. And it was Mark Wildman. It was Landmine University, which Alex Kanellis, which I later came to find, he was basically a student of David Weck, right?
Yep.
Who's the founder of the Weck method. There was Jesse Salas, Coach Jesse from Foundation Training was there, which has a very unique approach to managing pain. And so I was immediately thrown into all of these new concepts that completely challenged everything that I had kind of known from my, previous education and stuff. So it was a lot, and I was a white belt again. I was a complete white belt again. And it was a long journey, man. I mean, really 2 years, full years of, and I'm still learning. It was 2 years of immersing myself in these concepts, trusting them and not reverting back to, oh no, I just want to squat. I just want to press and pull, and trusting that there was something here for me that could potentially help. So, and then the biggest influence was Mark Wildman. Mark was there, and Mark completely changed everything for me by introducing me to clubs and rotational movements and throwing patterns, which I prioritize as number one now. And I put the squatting, the lunging, the pushing, the pulling, I put that as secondary.
Yeah.
So the rotation, to me, that is the most important thing when it comes to resilience and longevity.
Yeah, it's amazing because, what I found is how the clubs have helped me, because I started with the light clubs. And the light clubs are a different process. And I think they're just as good as the heavy clubs, but it works the body quite differently. Mm-hmm. But what I found that's something that is similar between the light and the heavy clubs is, you know, depending on what it is, because they're so dynamic. I mean, there are literally thousands of different training things that you can do with these beautiful tools. That's another beautiful thing about them. But I find that I get the most mileage in the things that help my posture and the things that help me elongate the spine while working on rotation at the same time. That's something that I found in these older modalities of training. I don't know if you found it also, but when I was taught strength training, strength was over here and mobility was over here.
Yeah.
And they were two separate things.
Yep.
But these older modalities really find a way to marry those two things together, where mobility and strength are, you know, worked simultaneous. And I love that about them. My 9-to-5 job, as you know, is, I am a city bus driver. And so I have 8 hours on a short day, 12 hours on a long day of sitting under high stress.
Right.
So it's not just normal driving. I've got a 40,000 pound death machine with grandma and grandpa and all the kids in the back of it.
Crazy.
And that's somebody's life, you know, and that's, you know, some trips it's 80 people in the back and that's 80 lives that you're responsible for. And nobody wants to be around the bus. I got to admit that even in my own car, I don't like being around the bus either.
Sure.
So I won't cut them off, but I will definitely get around them. So it's almost like Zen, which is you have to focus on one thing constantly. There is no free time. There's no free time in my head. There's no, what am I going to have for dinner? What's the girlfriend up to? What is my buddy up to? What's mom up to? It's like, I am driving and that's all I am. And it is so emotionally and mentally taxing that these arts are my mental, physical, and emotional training. It helps me get the energy to work out the stress and put in the good stuff, if you will. So I don't know. Yeah, it's such great training. Go ahead, Will. Go ahead.
You said some really interesting things there. What you're doing is basically like a moving meditation, right? Like you're in Zen for hours at a time, right? Like you have to be mentally focused, which is great because essentially you are cultivating that practice every single day you go to work. But you said you're in a high stress environment, and this is the latest stuff that I've really been turned on to. You know, I think I moved from traditional strength and conditioning to biomechanics, right? To now nervous system management.
Yeah.
And that is what it all comes down to. That is everything, right? Biomechanics, strength and conditioning is part of the nervous system management, essentially. Now you're in a high stress environment and you have, I'm sure you get, you know, frustrated. Everyone gets frustrated. You get anxious, right? You might even get a little fear, panic, shot through you sometimes when you're driving and close calls and all that stuff. These are all responses that are happening, right? That are being shot from your brain into your body through your nerves and the chemical systems in your body. And you're now kind of ingraining that into your nervous system by the position that you're assuming, right? So like, I wrote an article about this a couple of years, it's about a year or two ago now, about how jiu-jitsu destroys your body, right? And understanding the nervous system is something that no one is paying attention to, right? Like, you're just going to train, right? And you slap and bump. We roll for 5 rounds. You slap and bump. You get in your car and you go home. But what's happening is you are in a high stress environment when you're fighting, right? And even if you don't get nervous, but everyone gets nervous, even if you're in the gym, right? You get a little boost of adrenaline. You're going to fight. You are in a fight or flight state. And now you've got your breathing patterns, which are elevated because you're exhausted, right? You're literally fighting. And you're assuming essentially positions that are weak positions. You're assuming closed, fetal, tight positions in jiu-jitsu, right? So now you're in a fight or flight state, you're breathing screwed up, and you're basically screwing up your posture, right? Because you're assuming these positions and now you're doing this every day, right? You're doing this every day.
Yeah.
You're not doing any type of cool down or regulation at the end. No school does that. Very few schools do that. I've been to so many schools around the world. It's very rare to see a school that actually runs a good cool down. And then you get in your car, you go home, you do your thing, and then you think the nervous system is just going to figure it all out for you when you go home. Right?
Right. Yeah.
And you do this for 10 years, and then you're broken, and you're like, why am I broken? You know? And it's because you haven't, in my opinion, there's a lot of different things, right? Training in straight lines, not training in, circular strength or rotation or anything like that. But also you're not paying attention to your nervous system. And the best way you can do that is through breathing, right? Is through an actual breath practice. And that's boring. Like no one wants to do the breath work.
It is. But I agree with you. But it's fascinating too, because I think it can be boring, but it's depending on whose method you work, depending on whose breathwork method you work, you can find instantaneous changes and results. Because the breath work is so ingrained with how to regulate the nervous system.
Yep.
Not only do I love listening to my BJJ friends and a lot of other sport athletes. Like I've got buddies that do judoka, judo. I've got Western boxers, but I also listen to the world of personal protection and self-defense. And I won't name one gentleman, but I will name another. There's a gentleman that has been in the world of self-defense and protection and teaching his system all over the world to SWAT teams and stuff for 30 years. And he's in his mid 60s now. And it was in the last 5 or 6 years that he realized, oh my God, I was up ramping these guys to deal with adrenaline and stress. And I had a surefire method of showing those guys how to defend themselves or use a knife or whatever it was in that modality. He's like, but what I didn't understand was I had a system, I had a method for that. But how was I going to down ramp these guys?
Right.
Like I showed these guys how to redline. I didn't show them how to bring the car back to neutral or the nervous system back to neutral. I didn't show them what a resting state was. And so now in his 60s, he's totally into meditation and breathing. I've got another friend. I've sent you a couple of his links, and he's been on my show as a matter of fact, doing the warriorship conversing also. And that's Coach Kevin Secours out of Canada.
Yep.
And he goes all over the world. He teaches SWAT teams. He teaches law enforcement, all kinds of different things. And what's cool about Kevin's story is he started in traditional martial arts, did an F ton of them from all over the world, everything from Persian arts to Japanese arts, Indonesian, Kung Fu from China. He did Russian Sistema and found what worked, but also not just what worked for him, but what worked for others, and then came up with his integrated fighting systems. But Kevin was taught right away because one of his first influential teachers was a former chief of police from the Tokyo police force back in the 70s and 80s. And he's like, yeah, I've got my traditional samurai methodology, but he's like, but I also work the streets. So this is the stuff that works. Yeah. But some of the things that he taught Kevin right away was you're going to be under stress. Here are some breathing practices. And here are some meditation practices that will help regulate you. Because again, those systems realize, okay, well, you've got your battlefield over here and you got your family over here. And those you do want to separate.
Yes.
And so what are the training modalities like you're talking about, the nervous system and the breathing? How does that integrate into overall training, and making yourself better, not just for the mat, but for everyday life too?
Yeah. Here's the thing. If you are constantly, let's say you're not even redlining, but let's say you're getting into parasympathetic, or you're getting into sympathetic fight or flight on a daily basis, and you're not doing anything to downregulate. So maybe you are getting into parasympathetic when you sleep, but it's not as deep or as long as you could. You're never fully recovering. Parasympathetic is when the body actually heals. And so if you're not healing, you asked me about how my podcast has transformed. Now my whole thing is about resilience and longevity. How do we stay in the fight for as long as possible? So everything is focused on longevity. The quickest way to shortchange your longevity is to never get into parasympathetic, to never get into the recovery state, because your body is just going to now tense up, tighten up, and it's not going to heal, right? So if you want to really ensure longevity, you have to pay attention to the nervous system and getting into the parasympathetic state. If you are in this fight or flight state, right? Like another big thing for me, you mentioned like doing mobility with strength training, right? The body, when it's in fight or flight, essentially shuts down its external mechanisms that it doesn't need, right?
Yes.
It basically tightens you up so that you can run and deliver as much force as quickly as possible. Right. So you're fighting. So boom, I got to hit something super hard, or I got to get out as quick as possible. So what it's done is constricting everything. It's tightening everything to limit your movement options. It only wants you to fight or run, and that's it. When you get into, and when it tightens things, it essentially, you are restricting your mobility, right? So now you're living in that state. You are wondering why you're waking up tight all the time, right? It's a protection mechanism. Your body is actually protecting you by keeping you in a tense state so that you can fight, right? Or run. When you get into parasympathetic, you're now opening up movement options, right? Your body is relaxing. It's now giving you more movement options because there's no threat, or there's reduced threat. And so you can, one of the most interesting things to me is how we can manipulate the breath to improve mobility. And so this is like the latest stuff that I'm really into, where you can bias positions. You can get into positions that are going to drive breath into specific parts of your rib cage that may be compressed, or your chest, right? Or your diaphragm. A great book that you recommended to me was Breathing for Warriors. And, right?
Dr. Belissa, he's amazing. Yeah.
Excellent book. I recommend that. I think there's more to it than just that book, but that is a great place to start. Especially for some of these concepts, like you're mentioning with these high level, special ops types guys, where you're, regulating your breathing under high pressure. And you can use breath for different things. You can use it to get yourself excited. You can use it to relax yourself when you're under pressure, or you can use it to really recover, right? When you want to get into a fully relaxed state. But yeah, so understanding how now, if you take that concept of how important the breath is, it comes down to even this. An inhale, breathing in, is sympathetic. So that actually triggers, just breathing in is sympathetic, and exhale, that is parasympathetic, right? So now you can actually think about when you are working out, how many people are coordinating the breath with the concentric action, right? There's so many
Not
different.
Very many. Yeah.
Doing this, you're just going in there and you're just grinding yourself, right? And it's like you're just ramping yourself up. So the thing that I really like when you said earlier about how you can blend strength and conditioning with mobility, I'm now really learning. There's a guy that I'm studying under. His name is Alex Effer, and he's just brilliant. He's kind of done much more research than I have. I'd say he's 10 years in advanced than I am, right? I'm just starting to get scratched at this stuff. But he's figured out a system where you can bias positions in how you stand and how you hold yourself, combine it with the breath, and then perform your exercise. And you're actually going to improve mobility while you are working out, right? While
That's
you are,
beautiful.
yeah. And so the thing is that these things, these concepts are complex, man. Biomechanics
Sure.
is complex. The nervous system is so complex. I don't know if
Absolutely.
you looked into anything from Z Health, right? But they've pretty much mapped, the brain and how the
Yeah.
different parts of the brain are working with different visual, inputs and vestibular and all this type of, and it's very, very complex. So to dilute all of this, biomechanics, central nervous system, breathing, all of this stuff and deliver it to the masses who, really just want to look good.
Yeah. That's a fascinating point too. Someone that I would definitely, I'll have to send you some of his links. I was suggested to him by Wing Chun teacher was Ken Ware. Are you familiar with Ken Ware out of Australia?
No.
So what is it? Neurophysics is his company, I believe it is.
Okay.
Ken Ware taught himself how to be Mr. Universe in the 80s. Yeah, he went to some local gyms, didn't like what they were doing, and so got a bunch of books on weightlifting and kind of used his own body as an experiment and wound up being Mr. Universe out of it,
Wow.
But Ken has developed a way to work with the nervous system, and he does rehabilitation, and he works with people that have been in severe car wrecks that they're told that they'll never walk again.
Right.
He'll get them walking. I mean, they won't be running or anything like that, but he'll get them up and moving. And what he does is he almost retrains the brain to send out different pulses. And it kind of, the stuff that's damaged that won't ever be repaired, he kind of finds new pathways for the brain to reach into those damaged areas. And you can find Ken Ware on a bunch of different podcasts. He's been on quite a few of them, but his research into the nervous system has just been absolutely fascinating. As a matter of fact, he's actually got there's a documentary or a bio documentary on Ken and some of the work that he's done helping certain people, and Ken talks to you about it too. He's like, I can't guarantee that everyone that comes and does my program, it's going to work, but I will try to work with you as much as I can. But he's somebody, if you're looking for the nervous system, and what, people can do with their training with the nervous system, I'd check out Ken Ware and Neurophysics out of Australia. Yeah, there's so many, it's so fascinating too. Cause, I think about it, and we actually talked about this on Kung Fu Conversations, our little podcast. We have a bunch of different practices in the Chinese arts that focus on parts of the body. We have stuff that works on the musculature, the posture, which is the skeletal structure, the nervous system, the breathing, and all these different things. But everything gets affected, even if you're focusing on the nervous system, everything is affected. If you're focusing on the breath, everything is affected. If you're focusing on the muscles, everything is affected, because you can't dissect yourself out into those different, okay, this is nervous system, this is circulatory system, this is, the fascial system. We can't dissect ourselves out. So it's amazing how all of these systems interact a little bit like we were talking about with the weight, the weights, the strength training, and the mobility. Being married at the same time.
Absolutely. And literally everything you do at all times is influencing it. I mean, even right now, right? Like your body is this supercomputer that is constantly regulating itself, analyzing it. You have all these different systems, chemical and temperature and pressure, right? You've got all these systems that are constantly talking to each other all the time. Z Health goes into the three main one, the proprioceptive, the vestibular, and the visual systems. You basically have those three. the visual being the most important, the vestibular, which is in your ear, your balance being the second most important, and the proprioceptive really being the third. And it's just hilarious that you go into any gym or any coach, they're all focused on the third, the proprioceptive. That's like the most important to everyone in the world, is just the end point of the nervous system, right?
Yeah.
But things are constantly communicating with each other, right? And that's why I really like the breathing so much, is because the breath can influence the most amount of systems in the body at once, right? Yep. So that's why it's just super important to work on your breath and work on your breathing. There was another point I wanted to make. I kind of lost my train of thought there, but
that's okay. That's okay. I can ask you another question and we can come back to it if you want.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think this is a fun conversation. Like, these things, this excites me, right? Because we're all big nerds, right? We're huge nerds.
100%.
We're all trying to figure this thing out, right? We're all trying to get to closer to the truth. And it's like, all right, you may just scratch at something, right? But just like you said, like for example, I got obsessed with fascia for a long time, right? Mm-hmm. And fascia is highly important. I mean, that's another, big, huge, overlooked aspect of training. But that is just one thing that's integrated with everything else, right? So like, oh, you may Absolutely. Think there's guys out there who just, specialize in fascial conditioning, fascial stretching, right? They think they got to figure out, just work on your fascia and everything. So it's like, that's just one part of it all, man. We got so much more. So it's just this massive, massive puzzle that's really a lot of fun to kind of dissect and figure out and, talk about.
Absolutely. Very much so. I'm going to shift gears just a little bit, and then we'll get back to something else. So, someone that's been in the world of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for 15 years, and we're going to count at 15, I think. Mm-hmm. You've seen the ups and downs.
Mm-hmm.
You've seen the highs and lows. Tell me what you think is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is really getting right these days, and tell me something that you think that they really need to either change or grow up, or, because we have that. Owen and I's whole podcast is, here's what we can do right. Here's what Chinese martial arts does really well. And over here is where we need to, maybe do some more adulting in this category.
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. I think just naturally the martial art has figured itself out. It figured out that no gi is the next step forward to progress the martial art, right? To shed the gi and to focus on this very wrestling heavy, leg lock focused style of the martial art. And that just kind of evolved naturally. I mean, there were certainly characters who contributed to that, the sport moving in that direction, right? Gordon Ryan, John Danaher, sure. Absolutely. Andre Galvao, he's 6-time ADCC world champion. Even Marcelo Garcia, I mean, he's one of the legends in ADCC, but really it exploded with the leg lock revolution around, 2017. And so I think that it's gotten that right because it's brought so much attention to the sport. It's brought legit compensation to the athletes. We'll get to that in a second, but it's brought money and attention into the sport that otherwise the gi would not have brought. And so that's great. That's depending on how you look at it. Some people want to keep jiu-jitsu small, and I'm kind of one of those people, to be honest. I don't think it'll ever be like MMA. I don't think even MMA is on, like, I'm really into the World Series in baseball right now. that is a spectator sport through and through. You've got guys who are invested for 60 years into a team. You know what I mean? It's like, you're never going to compete with that. You can see how insane people get about football, American football. So it's just like, why are you even trying? Why is jiu-jitsu even trying? Like, I don't think the goal is to just get jiu-jitsu as big as humanly possible. It's like, for what? I don't know if that's the right thing to do. I kind of like just letting it evolve, like how it kind of has, and it's gotten to a really interesting point. And so now I think one of the areas that has really been exposed, particularly by Craig Jones. I mean, I worked at Flow Grappling for years, so I was kind of an insider and knew how bad it was for the athletes, right? I mean, these guys, like I'm saying, they're sacrificing their lives for this sport, and they're making nothing. I mean, barely. Yeah. They're quote unquote professionals and not making any money, right? And so I don't know if you're familiar, but Craig Jones essentially started an organization and an event to rival the most prestigious jiu-jitsu event in the world, which is ADCC. He started the Craig Jones Invitational. I mean, with the main focus of getting the athletes paid more. And so just quick breakdown, ADCC, I don't think you may get any money to show up. You get, your hotel and your flight paid for. I'm sure someone will correct me here. And if you win, I think it was $10,000 if you win the division. And then if you win the absolute, maybe $40,000. And so, you're training as hard as humanly possible to compete for, I think there's 16 spots per division. There's only 5 divisions, right? Every 2 years, it was like the Olympics, and you had to get through this insane bracket to make $40,000. And that's the pinnacle.
Yeah. Yeah. That is so, for the audience that, hasn't ever done any competition at all. Mine was just high school wrestling and some powerlifting in college, but just to give you an idea. So you're as a professional athlete. So what, Mr. Safford is talking about is for $40,000, which is barely a salary at all that you might not win. You have to pay for your membership to your BJJ gym, probably private coaching to get you up to the level that you need to be. You're talking about all your nutrition, which good nutrition costs a little bit more. You're talking about paying for your rent. You're talking about paying for your car. You're talking about paying for, do you have kids? Do you have a wife? Do you have all these other things? We're talking about for $40,000 somehow, which is more, probably we're looking at somewhere in the closer to $85,000 to $100,000 a year that you need to make it as a pro athlete like that. Because that's what you are. When you're competing, you're getting maybe half your year's worth of pay if you win it, which is a hell of a thing to do. So that's awful.
Yeah. And it was, I mean, man, I know from experience, those events, the highest level events, they make a lot of money. The pay-per-views and the ticket sales and all those things, they make a lot of money. And so Craig Jones was, he was always coming in second place. And so he was never getting the prize money. And he was like, screw this. I'm going to start my own thing. And he started a invite only small 2 divisions, over 80 kilos, under 80 kilos. I think it was 16 men, and you won $1 million. You get $1 million if you win. So, and then he did it the same exact weekend as ADCC this year to rival it. So, it was just last September. Was it in September or August? It's usually in September. I think this year was August. We had the first CJI winners, and Nicky Rod won over 80, and then Cade Ruotolo won under 80, and they both won $1 million each. And every grappler who competed got $10,000.
That's great. That's great. That's great.
So, the industry is improving, but you need people like Craig, disruptors. Just like in any industry, you need those innovators. We've got a ton of innovators in jiu-jitsu. You need disruptors too, who are just going to shake everything up and say, hey, like, the status quo is no longer acceptable. Like, we need to push this forward, for the people who are, like you're saying, sacrificing everything for like nothing.
So let's get back to your personal training now.
Yeah.
And let's say I hired Will Safford and I showed you my goals and my wants. What would, I'm sure you tailor it to each person, but what would a generalized training these days be with Will Safford if I was coming to you for training?
First thing I would check your range of motion. Like, that's where you start, right? Like, so how much mobility and access to your full range, right? And we know the numbers that you should have, right? 180 degrees of shoulder flexion. And, so we know these numbers. And so that's where I would start and be like, okay. One thing I also want to say, this is the thought I forgot earlier, because you mentioned posture, and there is a lot of people think posture is just a bunch of bull. Like, you don't need to worry. There's no correlation of improving posture to sports performance or anything like that. But I believe that posture is a dynamic thing. There's no perfect posture, right? It's not like we're trying to get you to this thing. It's just, let's look at your current posture, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And see if we can improve some things that's being shown to us from your current posture. So it's a dynamic. Posture is dynamic. And really what it is it's a snapshot of the nervous system, right? Like, if you have rolled forward shoulders and a lot of compression in your lower back and an anterior pelvic tilt and one leg that turns out, we're getting a firsthand look and say the nervous system is holding tension here. It's holding you in this pattern to essentially protect you. And really what's happening is your center of gravity is being pushed forward in order to manage all of these external forces, including gravity, right? So your body is adapting through compensations to manage gravity coming down on you and essentially ground force pressures coming up from the ground, right? So ground reaction forces. And then you have internal pressure happening inside the system with how you breathe, how you hold yourself, your emotions play a huge part, right? So we can look at posture as this snapshot of how the nervous system is managing the current state of affairs, right?
I love it. Yeah.
And so that's where I'd start. I'd say, okay, let's look at your current posture. Let's look at your range of motion. Let's see where your limitations are, right? And a lot of times many people have the same things going on, right? Like a lot of the patterns are repetitive, like an anterior pelvic tilt, right? And so I would also say that if there's no pain and your body has figured out a strategy to manage all of this, then you don't really need to do anything, right? It's like, I would work you, I would kind of get you right into some like rotational training and, make sure your hips are both working the right way and kind of prioritize that. But if you do have a little bit of pain, right, and you don't have access to your full range of motion in your hips, your shoulders, your rotation, that's where I would kind of start, and I would correct some of those things by getting you into positions and having you breathe into these positions in order to open space, right? So you can open the space, get the range of motion first, and then we can start working on some of the actual exercises, which, man, lately it's been about a lot of isometrics. I'm completely obsessed with isometrics lately. if you think about it, that's when you squeeze, right? And you are holding a position, you are essentially completely activating the nervous system to that point. So the nerves, what you're trying to do is generate maximal amount of tension. And there's different ways you can do isometrics. They don't have to be max, but you are essentially patterning that pathway from your brain through your nervous system to that muscle. And so we can teach the nervous system, like, look, this is where I want the tension. This is where I want you to manage pressure. This is where I want you to manage forces. I don't want you to manage forces in your low back. I want you to manage forces in your glutes, right? So, so I'd be probably doing a lot of isometrics, and then I would probably get you into club swinging, because I think if you are coming from a background of traditional squats, presses, push, pulls type things, the clubs is going to link all that. Is going to link all of that strength that you've built in those straight lines. It's just going to fortify your body, because now you're going to learn to be strong in 360 degrees rotationally, right? And you're going to start just naturally working some of those biomechanical patterns that human beings were really designed to do, like walking, running, and throwing.
Perfect. Awesome. I love it. As we start to wind things down.
Yeah.
What is Will Safford up to these days with the podcast? What does your mat time look like? Are you still getting out there on the mat? And then what are the next things for you, sir?
Yeah. So, to kind of break down all the things that I'm doing, man, I have a lot of, what do they call it? Things in the fire.
Irons in the fire.
I got a bunch of irons in the fire, man. So fortified training is actually taking up a lot of my bandwidth right now. And that's a website that I created to see. Order in Progress is really for the martial artist. Fortified training is all the methods that I have been exploring, and things that I'm talking about in this episode here, just for the general population, really for men, any man 35 and up who wants to live a more resilient, quote unquote, pain-free life. I've partnered with Mark Wildman. I've partnered with one of the best isometric coaches in the world. His name is Matt Schifferly. Garrett Colgian is a physical therapist who specializes in PRI, which is some of these concepts that I've been talking about, Postural Restoration Institute. So I'm really putting together a group of coaches there that are thinking differently than the mainstream and are more aligned with some of these, topics that we've been covering. And then I run Order in Progress. I work with Mark Wildman, closely with a lot of things that he does. We have 2 new programs coming out. On Order in Progress, we have our first kettlebell program, which is awesome. We've got another club bell program, heavy club program coming out. And then I also run a marketing agency. So I help a lot of jiu-jitsu schools and gyms grow their businesses. So to answer your question, my mat time is pretty limited these days, just with all of the things that I have. And it's this particular time of year because of the holidays, Black Friday. This is a big time for a lot of businesses. So, but I do get on the mats, and I really enjoy now. It's kind of funny, but I really enjoy movement on the mat, right? Like mat movement. And so I've actually always loved drilling. I'm a, disciple of Andre Galvao, who wrote the book Drill to Win. Drilling is fun to me. Some guys absolutely hate drilling. Huge driller. I love drilling. I love, getting into the positions and feeling things right. And then also when you're drilling, you can really understand, like if you now have this new biomechanical lens that I'm working with, and you get into positions, you're like, holy shit, I need so much hip internal rotation for this position. Like, this is insane how much hip internal rotation I need right here. And so I'm able to now kind of dissect these positions on the mats where it's like, this is a massive vulnerability. Like if you don't have adequate hip internal rotation for this position, it's going to go right into your lower back and you're going to have back problems. You're going to like this. And it's a lot of it is the leg locks, right? So a lot of leg entanglements just require really, really mobile, full access to your hips entire range. And so I've been playing, a lot of my mat time lately has been a lot of drilling and a lot of dissection of positions to kind of understand them from this new lens.
You're reverse engineering, aren't you? You're feeling, hey, I have to have this quality of movement, like you were saying with the hips, or maybe I need more mobility through the thoracic region to get this correct. Or, maybe I need more strength in this, kind of weird torquing and twisting that I need to do with my body. And so then you can go back to your map and your whiteboard and your drawing board and be like, am I going to get it through kettlebell? Am I going to get it through the club? Am I going to get it through here? Maybe I have to work on, isolation, the isometrics and the breathing to get that quality. Is that kind of what you're finding, Will?
100%. Exactly. And I'm really getting into positions now that I have this lens of longevity. I'm like, all right, I want to stay away from this position because this is going to require a lot of range of motion. And if let's say I don't have it that day, right? Like I'm feeling tight, the nervous system is a little constricted, right? I don't want to put myself into that position and risk being put there under speed and load, because then that's when you get hurt. So I'm like, and jiu-jitsu is too dynamic that you can't prevent every single position, but I can say, all right, I can elect not to play this position, right? Or I can, if I'm getting close to this type of position, let me get away from this. Let me reset, right? And so, I'm trying to reverse engineer it and take what I'm learning on the mat back to the weight room, I guess you could say. I work out outside.
Me too. Yeah. Back my garage. Yeah. Outside of the garage. Yeah.
And what I found was that a lot of the positions that really Mark has programmed in his programs, it's like a catch-all. They like catch a lot of the primary positions, like shin box, right? Like the shin box position. That's such a freaking good position. And there's so many different ways to manipulate it. The hunter squat, right? It's like, so I now pride Order and Progress on high value methods to improve resilience for jiu-jitsu. So I'm like, let me discard what was the Bruce Lee quote? Is like, pick what is take what is uniquely your own.
Yeah. So you keep what works, discard what doesn't, and make essential what is uniquely your own. Kind of, that's a butchering way to say it, but yeah.
Exactly. But that's what I'm doing. So I'm like, we only have so much time, and I'm like, oh,
that's it. Yeah.
I want to put my time into these positions that are going to give me the biggest bang for the buck, improve mobility and strength at the same time, and kind of fortify my body for the positions that I'm going to get onto the mat. So that's like where my mind is with jiu-jitsu right now.
Beautiful. Well, my friend, I think we covered plenty of topics today. Was there anything else that you wanted to leave the listener with?
No, I think the only thing that I have to promote is the Fortified Training Online Summit, which is going to be a free event on October 30th. And so we've got a bunch of great coaches. Two of the coaches I mentioned Matt and Mark. And then we've also got Al Cavadlo and Alex Salkin. Al is a bodyweight calisthenics master.
He's awesome. Al's awesome.
He's incredible, man.
Yeah.
I took his seminar last year, and like that calisthenics stuff is really fascinating to be able to master internal tension and control of your own body to do things like a human flag is just right. Yeah.
He's great.
And then Alex Salkin is a Strong First level 2 instructor who is just super passionate about kettlebell training, and he's got a ton of great information. So I don't know when you're going to put this episode out, but it's October 30th. The website is fortifytraining.com/online-summit-register. And it's free. We're going all day. We're going for like 4 hours, and we're just going to be talking about all this stuff, diving deep into these methods to help build resilience so you can live an active, healthy life.
Beautiful. Well, this has been a long time coming, like I said. We'll kill the recording because I want to harass you just for a couple minutes more. But as we leave, thank you for your time. And I kind of hope to talk to you down the road as well. This has been a blast. And thanks so much for what you do on your show. I'm still a big fan of that show. I'll go back and listen to old episodes. And I hope to hear some more. Is that the Order in Progress podcast?
Correct. Yep. You got it.
Awesome. Thanks for your time, Will. Have a blessed day, my friend.
All right. Thank you, Randel. And like I said in the beginning, I really appreciate what you're doing, man. I think it's a great service, and we're lucky to have you, man.
Appreciate you. Thanks, brother.